Hello, how's everyone doing today? I'm here with a special guest, Walter Block. Walter Block is an Austrian economist, or as I like to refer to it, just an economist. Hopefully one day Austrian economics will just be referred to as economics, and the rest will be referred to as fiction. He is an economist. He teaches at Loyola University. He's the author of the trilogy Defending the Undefendable 1, Defending the Undefendable 2, and I'll let you take a guess at the other third book is called. How are you doing today?
The third one I'm just working on now, so it's not out. Only Defending 1 and 2 are published. The 3 is I'm working on right now, and hopefully early next year.
All right, very nice. You care to give maybe a teaser or what some topics maybe?
Well, I won't give a teaser, but I have another trilogy also that I should mention. And that is, the first one was Privatizing Roads, Streets, and Highways. The second one, which I'm just coming out with now, it ought to be out by the end of this year, is Privatizing Oceans, Rivers, and Lakes. And the third one, which is just in the early stages, is Privatizing Space. The Moon, Mars, the space program, education and research, stuff like that. So I've got 2 trilogies going. And in both cases, I've got the first 2 really going. The second part of the oceans is it's in the publisher's hands now, and we're just dickering over crossing T's and dotting I's.
All right, cool. Looking forward to that. So I guess my first question is, there's an article which I know you're a big fan of, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I am a fan of Murray Rothbard, but from what I've read, it's my least favorite article. And that is, Do You Hate the State? Which for people who haven't read it, it's basically about who are our allies in the fight for freedom. And Rothbard says it's not really a question of anarchist. It's a question between the radicals versus the conservatives, as he calls it, or I guess you could say the deontologists versus the consequentialists. And I guess from my point of view, well, first of all, I don't think anyone is a pure deontologist or a pure consequentialist. I think everyone believes that what they advocate is the most moral and also provides the best consequences. So I think it's a false distinction. And secondly, why does it matter? I don't really care why you respect my rights. All I care is that you do. So I guess my first question to you is, why are you a fan of that article, and why does it make a difference how we get to libertarianism?
Well, I'm a professor. I'm never allowed to answer questions directly, and I'm not going to make an exception in this case. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
What you said is you're a big fan of Murray Rothbard, if I can put words in your mouth, but this article you don't like, or at least it's the least favorite. Let me just put it on record that we are not a Randian cult. We don't have to agree with our leader, and I certainly would say that Murray is our leader. If there's any Mr. Libertarian for the ages, it's Murray. But not only don't I have least favorite articles of his, but I have articles that I disagreed with. Because as I say, we're not a Randian cult, and when Murray was alive, I published these, and I published some after his untimely death. We disagree on some things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Libertarianism and Austrianism are difficult subjects. It's not 2 + 2 = 4. And rational people, even starting with the same premises, and I certainly do with Murray, come up with different ideas. So let me just list about 10 of my articles where I disagree with Murray. One is on immigration. Another is inalienability. Do you have a right to sell yourself as a slave? Another is punishment theory. Another is, well, I've got 2 or 3 others on immigration. And then there's the one about the human body shield, or the using people as missiles. If I take you and throw you at Hillary, whose fault is that? Or if I use you and I try to shoot Hillary, which I don't intend to do, just using it as an example, does she have a right to shoot me back or not, or what? And that's the human body shield argument. Another one is Murray thinks that money, here's an Austrian point, Murray thinks that money is neither a capital good nor a consumer's good. Bill Barnett and I have an article saying, no, it's a capital good. We also disagree with Mises, Rothbard, and Salerno on costs. We have something on his V-shaped average total cost curve. Murray accepted the Hayekian triangle. My co-author Bill Barnett and I do not. We have a difference with Murray on saving and investment. And also the relationship between wealth and income and time preferences, empirical, not apodictic, critique of Rothbard and Hans Hoppe in this case. And another one on immigration, and another one on the division of labor. And here I co-author something with Peter Klein and Per Henrik Hansen. So I have maybe 15 articles where I criticize Murray, always respectfully. I mean, the man was a genius, and but we don't have to agree on everything. Okay, but now let's get back to the article that you mentioned, and you're evil, you're an abomination because you disagree with Murray on this, and I agree with Murray on this, and I'm kicking you out of the Libertarian movement. And of course I'm kidding, because you too have a right to disagree with me or with Murray or with anyone else. And, you know, we've done many of these interviews over the years. I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 of them. And we've always had a good time. And sometimes we agree and sometimes we disagree. On this one, I think it's a pretty good article. And I wouldn't say it's my least favorite. The other ones where I criticize Murray are more least favorite of mine. Here I support him. The way I understand Murray...
The sound's fuzzing in and out a little. I don't know if it's just on your end. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm fading in and out?
Yeah, it's fuzzy. Sorry. Continue. I think it's probably better now.
I don't know what to say. Do you want to go to Skype instead, or should we stick with this?
No, it's fine now.
Okay, should I repeat what I said?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Should I repeat what I just said, though?
No, now it's fine.
But 2 minutes ago, maybe it wasn't good, but it wasn't that bad that I have to repeat myself.
No.
Okay, great. Let me continue. The way I understand this article of Murray's is he was mainly attacking someone like David Friedman. And what's David Friedman's shtick? What's David Friedman's view? David Friedman is an anarchist, and he's made sterling contributions to the theory of anarcho-capitalism. However, in Murray's view, David Friedman does not hate the state. He sees the state as bumbling, he sees the state as inefficient, but he sees the state as sort of just like one more institution in society, and it's inefficient, and we should get rid of it. But he doesn't hate it. He doesn't have any visceral hatred for it. He just sort of sees it as bumbling. And this ticks off Murray, and I think rightfully so, because the state is an abomination. The state is an evil monster. And the proper response is hatred or, revulsion or disgust or something like that. Not, oh, well, they're inefficient and, we should replace them, but what the heck. Murray says that he'd rather have a minarchist who hates the state, because the state goes way over and above minarchism, armies, courts, and police, armies to keep foreign bad guys off of us, not to export democracy, police to keep local bad guys off of us, not to stop victimless crimes, and courts, to determine guilt and innocent. And, somebody like, I don't know, Ron Paul, who's not an anarchist, but I think hates the state, or Ayn Rand, who I think also hates the state, even though she was not an anarchist. She hates the state because it goes way and above and outside the proper realm for the state in her view. And I think Murray has much more comfort with those people, even though they're not anarchists, than when people like David Friedman, who don't hate the state and think that the state should be abandoned. And I sort of agree with Murray here. I mean, it's sort of a little like vanilla and chocolate ice cream. Which one do you like? You might like vanilla, or I like chocolate, or vice versa. It's a subjective thing, but, Murray is articulating a subjective view. Murray used to have this thing, hatred is my muse. I used to put that on my wall when I started writing, and what Murray would say is, he sees something that usually the state is doing, and he hates it, and he wants to get rid of it, and he starts writing about it. Well, hatred is my muse too, and I hate the state more than any other institution because they're mass murderers. According to, what's his name, Rummel, the state killed almost 200 million people, and I don't think that's even including the wars between the states, just killing 200 million of their own people. And this puts into the shade, the mafia or the Blood or the Crips or any other gang which kills on a retail basis, whereas the state kills on a wholesale basis. So I think that that's pretty good. Now, you did also mention the fact of deontology versus utilitarianism. And I agree with you. It doesn't really matter how you get to your hatred of the state, whether it's from utilitarianism or deontology or both. And there are certain people that are just like, when I try to convince people, say, of the pay gap between men and women, there are two ways I do. One is empirical or utilitarian, and I say that the reason that women make less money than men is because they have an unequal share of household responsibilities, cooking, cleaning, baby tending, etc. And that whenever you do anything, you do it at the cost of something else. So, if you do a lot of housework, you're not going to be otherwise as good as in the market. And there are two proofs or indications or evidences that I offer. One is empirical, and I start comparing the male and female wage rate of people who've never been married. Not single, but never been married. And by gum and by golly, there's no wage gap. Whereas you compare the wage gap of women and men who have been married or are married or widows, divorced, separated, whatever. And now the wage gap is way more than 23 or 25 or 30 cents. It's more like 50 cents, 60 cents. So that's one empirical utilitarian indication. And some people are more convinced by that. And then the other one is, look, if women were really paid 25 cents less on the dollar or 30 cents less on the dollar for equal work, I'd fire all the men and hire all the women and make a lot of money. And since that's not happening, that proves that this isn't true. Sort of a deontological or a logical proof. And I think we libertarian Austrians or Austro-libertarians should use both. They're both in our repertoire. Why not use utilitarianism to show that if you adopt laissez-faire capitalism, the poor will get richer and everyone will be richer and there'll be no poverty. And also adopt the view that deontologically, anything but laissez-faire capitalism means that somebody is violating the non-aggression axiom. Somebody is compelling somebody else to do something against their will, and that's per se wrong. And why should the government be able to do things that we as individuals are not able to do for each other? For example, we're not supposed to murder, rape, or steal from each other, and yet the government is allowed to do that. So that's sort of the ontological argument, and I don't see why we shouldn't use both. No?
No, I agree. I mean, I think the problem with only using one is, well, let's say is more a consequentialist and doesn't really care about the deontology. He could become a libertarian if you would use more, you have to know your audience, and so if you insist on only using one way, instead of increasing the number of libertarians, all you're doing is limiting yourself to only deontologists instead of very good consequentialists who we could have in our movement. So
well,
it seems
there is this Myers-Briggs test. Have you heard of that?
Briefly, but I'm not totally familiar what it is.
Like a psychological thing, and it divides people into 16 groups in terms of their intellectual way of looking at things, in terms of their emotions and what have you. And it was determined that like 3 or 4% of all people in the United States are the ABC group, whatever the ABC group, and that virtually all libertarians were in the ABC group. ABC is wrong. I'm just saying one small group of the Myers-Briggs. And that's why we libertarians are having such trouble converting the masses to libertarianism, because we're all in one small sector of the psychology. But I agree with you entirely. But I don't think Murray's article is saying we should only be deontologists, that we shouldn't use utilitarian arguments. He's saying that for him, the deontology is more important, and I agree personally. The deontology is much more clear. But I don't think Murray says there or anywhere else that we shouldn't use utilitarian arguments. We shouldn't say, well, when you have a minimum wage, it creates unemployment for unskilled workers, and this is a horrible thing, and offer some statistical evidence for it, like the sort of statistical evidence I was offering for the male-female wage gap. You'd have to quote me something from this article that is your least favorite article, where Murray comes out against utilitarian libertarianism.
Well, I mean, I think that's the implication when he criticizes someone like Milton Friedman for making arguments, not that the state is evil, but arguments in the sense that the state is just inefficient. And I think that's where his criticism is. I mean, there is a line actually that I love by Murray, and I'm forgetting if it's in For a New Liberty or in a new or The Ethics of Liberty, which I think is the better book of the two. And he says something which is, even if libertarianism would lead to a horrible society for the vast majority of people, I would still advocate it because it's the most moral system. It just so happens that fortunately that's not the case. So that's as far away from consequentialism as you can get, right? There's a sort of a confession of, even if what I'm advocating is going to make 98% of the population miserable, it's ethical, so I don't care.
You wouldn't say you don't care, but I would follow Murray in this regard. But this is a hypothetical that is, it's sort of like saying that if there were a square circle, because look, all the free enterprise system consists of is voluntary trade. That's it, voluntary trade, and every voluntary trade necessarily in the ex ante sense makes both parties to it better off. So it's a little difficult to see how economic freedom can have such bad consequences. Look, you bought that shirt for $30, the black shirt you're wearing, and it must be that you valued that shirt at more than $30, otherwise you wouldn't have bought it. And it must have been that the guy who sold you the shirt, he had thousands of them, valued the shirt at less than $30, and therefore there was necessarily a mutual benefit, at least in the ex ante sense. Ex post, who knows? But the presumption is you got a good bargain, unless there's a fraud or I don't know, a lemon shirt or something like that. But if you want to be hypothetical, suppose I could prove to you that murdering and raping would somehow make mankind better off. Don't ask me how that could be, because the victim of the rape and the victim of the murder is going to say, wow, this is horrible. Well, what you're really getting at is the utility monster. Suppose there was a utility monster. What's a utility monster? A utility monster is some guy or some creature. He really enjoys raping and murdering human beings way more than we disenjoy it. And what Murray is saying, in effect, is if there was such a utility monster, such that if he raped and murdered and stole from and did all sorts of bad things to us, somehow his utility would outweigh, his gain in utility would outweigh our loss in utility, Murray would say, F him, the hell with him. I can't use the 4-letter F word, but putting words into Murray's mouth, he would say, the hell with the utility monster. We don't care that utility is increasing on the basis of rights violations. See, there's a case where it's not a contradiction in terms, although, as an Austrian, we don't really believe in cardinal utility, and we certainly don't believe in interpersonal comparisons of utility, such that you could say, well, when the utility monster rapes a woman, he gets more utils out of her than she loses from being raped. I mean, that's silly. Right. But, somehow, if it were true, we're into hypotheticals. If it were true, we as libertarians would say, well, too bad on the utility monster. We don't care that utility increased as a result of the rape. The rape is wrong, and we're against it because we believe in the non-aggression principle.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that Rothbard criticized. I'm a big fan of Rothbard. I'm a big fan of David Friedman. He was on my show once, and while I like both of them, I do feel that Friedman's version is far more realistic than Rothbard's, because Friedman's version is that you arrive at the basis of law through the market system, and the market determines what the legal code is, and in different areas you would have different laws, and hence a polycentric legal system. And according to Rothbard, you would have a libertarian legal code that the private defense agencies would pledge themselves to follow. And I was raised as a Jew, and one of my favorite jokes is how many rabbis does it take to change a light bulb? Some say 2, some say 3. There's always going to be disagreement. I think to have a society where every court is going to agree or be libertarian that's wishful thinking. So I think that Friedman's version is the more realistic version.
Well, I'm a fan of David Friedman too. I think he's done yeoman work. He's done good work. Who can deny this? But when it comes to this issue, I think he's horrible. I wrote an article on his chapter 43, I think it is, in Machinery of Freedom, where he makes these sorts of points, and I really heavily criticized him. And I sent him the article, and I said, David, the ball is on your side of the net. What do you say? You want to have a debate verbally? By the way, invite him on your show, and we can have at it. Or do you want, since mine was in a journal article, would you like to reply in a journal? And he hasn't responded. Look, I think that the what do you call it? The smoking gun, or the problem with this, David Friedman, is a thing called Sati. What's Sati? S-U-T-E-E? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Well, what this is in India, when a married man dies, they burn his body, and they push his wife onto the funeral pyre against her will. Sometimes she'll go willingly because she believes in Sati, and other times they'll just push her if she doesn't want to go. Now, suppose India went laissez-faire, capitalist, anarchist, and they had private courts, and they all supported Sati. Well, Murray has the view, just because a private court said it doesn't mean that it's necessarily right. And I think Murray is absolutely right. If an Indian court, or all the Indian courts, upheld Sati, Sati is still wrong. Sati is an abomination. And I don't care how many private courts support Sati, Sati is wrong. And David Friedman would be vulnerable to this objection. He would say, well, look, all the private courts agreed, therefore Sati is, namely, he doesn't have any deontology. We've got plenty of utilitarianism. He doesn't have any deontology. The goddamn private court that supports Sati, the hell with it. Mm-hmm. How do you react to them apples?
I would react to saying, well, yes, it's bad, and we can't defend it, but it's still going to exist. I mean, if crazy people believe in ridiculous superstitions, I can't stop that. It's going to exist. So it's going to exist whether we like it or not. Then what's the alternative? I think the alternative is either we have a monopoly court system where it exists over a huge area, or we have a decentralized system where this thing it's not going to be as prevalent, and so that's the better alternative. I'm not a utopian. I don't believe in solving problems. I just believe in minimizing them. I don't think that under a libertarian society there'll be peace and nonviolence. There'll just be fewer of it. It's like executing a murderer. You're not going to end murder by executing murderers. You'll just have fewer of them available in the world.
Well, I think we've subtly moved from the normative to the positive. Do you think Murray Rothbard denies that Sati would exist under these circumstances? He doesn't say it wouldn't exist. You're putting words in his mouth. You're making a straw man. Of course, he would. I'll speak for him. I really can't speak for him, but on this one, I'm sure I can. Or forget about Murray. Let me just talk about me. I can speak for myself. I don't deny that Sati would exist. And you say that David Friedman is more realistic because he knows it will exist. I know it'll exist too under these circumstances. Of course it'll exist. The question is it right? And if you ask David Friedman or Milton Friedman, what is justice? They're going to sort of look at you crazy. I once asked Milton Friedman, before I really knew him well, I said, what motivates your passion for justice? And you know what he said to me? He said, the passion for justice is a bad thing, and people kill each other over that, and I'm against it. He doesn't have a concept of justice.
I think I knew what he meant by that. I think I knew what he meant by that, though.
Well, I think I know what he meant by that, too, but the point I'm trying to make is...
I think he was talking about, Isabella Peterson's Humanitarian with the Guillotine, that all the horrible things have been in the name of justice. I think that's
true. I don't doubt that that's what he meant, but the point is, he has no concept of justice. He's eschewing justice. And Murray Rothbard and I'll speak for myself, to me, justice is the essence of libertarianism. once you get away from the compass of justice, you're not a libertarian. I mean, if you can, and now give me this thing that yes, Sati will exist. Let me give you another case. Here we are in 1915, and a black man has been falsely accused of raping a white woman. And now the black man is in jail. And there's a white sheriff. And the white sheriff is a libertarian, and he's dedicated to the notion that before this black man is executed or punished for rape, he has to be seen by a court. Whereas there's this lynch mob out there facing the jail and saying, we want that N person, I'm not going to use the N word, we want that black person who's been accused for rape, and we've got a rope here and we're going to hang him. Okay, so now the situation is that if the white sheriff, the libertarian, turns over the black accused rapist to the mob, one person will die, namely the innocent black person who didn't rape the white woman. He'll die because they're going to string him up and kill him. That's scenario one. Scenario two is the sheriff says, look, boys, you know, I'm a libertarian. I believe in justice. Justice with a capital J. And you want to get this black guy who's my prisoner, you got to go through me. And then in that scenario, what happens is that the mob charges him, and he shoots half the mob, and the mob shoots at him and kills 25 innocent people, and the sheriff dies and the black guy dies. Now, the utilitarian would say, hey, you know, let the black guy go. Let him string him up. I can see David Friedman saying that. I can see Milton Friedman saying that. I hope you don't say that, because that's evil. That's monstrous. That's a violation of justice. Justice, though the heavens fall. Justice means that libertarian sheriff, he shoots all those, as many as he can, and since the mob is too big, they overrun him, and too bad. That's his job, to defend that black guy who is unjustly accused of rape or murder or whatever he was unjustly accused of. So here you have another stark exist. Now, don't tell me anything about what's real. We're talking that's positive. I'm talking about normative. What is right? What is righteous? Now, the utilitarian might have a way out of this. What the utilitarian might say, well, look, if the black guy is let loose to the mob, this will undermine law and order. And then we'll have a very dire, what do you call it, dire future, because, you know, the respect for law will go by the boards, and this will kill many more people than in this little town. But the answer to that is, right after this, the whole world ends. Say the Martians kill us all or whatever. Still, I want to say that it was unjust for that sheriff to let the black guy go to the mob and let him be strung up, because he was innocent, for God's sakes. And
I agree.
Well, no, you don't agree. Well, I'm glad you agree, but if you agree, then you have to give up on goddamn David Friedman and his father, Milton Friedman, who don't have a just bone in their body, for whom the concept of justice is just, I don't know, silly or irrelevant.
Just, you know, I look at the overall package, just like you disagree with Murray on a dozen or so issues, you still, you know, revere him as a philosopher because his contributions override those 12 flaws. And I think the same applies for me in the case of David, him on every issue. But he said enough good stuff that,
I agree with you. Look, I don't revere David and Milton, but I think that David and Milton have done yeoman work, especially David, who is much more radical than his father. But his father had a bigger megaphone, and his father converted hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of people to libertarianism with those Free to Choose series and his books and all. So I'm not saying that look, if I favor Rand Paul, I can certainly favor the Friedmans, you know. So I'm not saying that Milton and David were horrible. I'm not saying that they weren't libertarian. They were libertarian of a sort, and I can get into that later as to, you know, the makeup of libertarianism. Don't misinterpret me. I'm not saying that Milton Friedman was a commie or David is evil. I look up to these two people. I have a picture of Milton Friedman and me in my office. I use capitalism and freedom for my classes sometimes. I think they both made very positive contributions to libertarianism. And I think if they didn't exist, and Patry Friedman also, the grandson of Milton, son of David, with his seasteading, I think all of them have made important positive contributions. So don't misinterpret me as saying just because I disagree with them on this, I toss them out entirely. I'm very grateful to their contributions. We have many, many more libertarians than we would otherwise have, but for their contributions. If they became doctors, say, instead of philosopher economists, the libertarian movement would be much worse. However, having said that, I think they are wrong on this issue. And if I can criticize Murray on issues, I can certainly criticize David and Milton. So I don't want you to say or to interpret me as saying, well, that there was no good in them. Yes, they don't have a justice bone in their body, but they other kinds.
I'm glad because you said, because I saw a debate with you. Is Milton Friedman a libertarian? And in the debate, you said something which I'm like, oh, Walter, I hope you're just being hyperbolic. And you said, I hate Milton Friedman. And I'm like, can't you separate friend from foe? What's wrong? Why would you say such a thing?
I was young and foolish when I said that. I take it back. I don't remember saying it. I don't hate Milton Friedman. I think he made very positive contributions to economics. Well, not on money, but Murray Rothbard used to say people specialize in what they're horrible on, and Milton Friedman specialized in the two things he was horrible on. He was horrible on money, and he was horrible on educational vouchers, but he was magnificent on minimum wage and free trade and rent control and occupational licensure and a whole bunch of dozens of other things he was really, really good on, as is David Friedman. So if I said I hate Milton Friedman, it was in a fit of passion. I was young and foolish. I apologize for it. I don't remember saying it, but if you say I said it, I trust your judgment, or I trust your repertorial skills. I'm sorry I said that. I'm not saying it now. I don't hate him. I am very grateful to the pair of them for promoting liberty.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that pisses me off, and I don't know if people do it just because they have no arguments, but like sometimes, if I'll say I like a certain figure, like I'll say, oh, I think Ayn Rand said a lot of good stuff. People will quote, what she said about Native Americans and saying, do you still like Ayn Rand? Or, Rothbard saying it's okay for parents to starve their children. Do you still like Rothbard? As if, I have to agree with 100% of what they say. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Life of Brian, but there's a scene where, he goes to this anti-Roman group and he goes, you're the Judean People's Front. And they go, fuck off. We're the People's Front of Judea. And the joke is like, you're so similar. What is with all this fighting about, things that don't really matter? And I guess, sorry, continue.
Let me just mention this starving children business. My take on this, and I don't for a moment believe that Murray meant that you should literally be allowed to starve your children without being punished for it. But my view on that is, you don't mind us getting a little off the topic, but I mean, it's sort of like waving a red flag at a bull. I had to respond to that.
Go ahead.
My analysis of that is we don't want to have any positive obligations, because positive obligations are anathema to libertarianism. They're only negative obligations. Don't murder, don't rape, don't kidnap, don't enslave, don't commit arson, don't. There are no positive obligations in libertarianism. So what about the situation of a parent that doesn't want to feed their kid anymore? Do they have to feed their kid? And I say no, they don't have to feed their kid, but they have to notify an orphanage or a church or a synagogue or a hospital that they no longer wish to feed their kid. And they have to bring the kid to the hospital or to the orphanage and say, here, take this kid. Now you might say, well, but isn't this a positive obligation? Don't you have to get off your rear end and go to a hospital or something? And I don't know if I've done this on your show before, but I'm going to take the risk of doing it again. And that's this.
We have a whole episode.
Remember the bagel theory? I'm going to give you and your cohorts a bagel theory, or maybe, not to be too Jewish about it, a donut theory. And here we have area A, area B, and area C. Right? Can you see A, B, and C? A is the hole in the donut or in the bagel. B is the bagel itself, and C is the outside area. Are you allowed to homestead in that format? Namely, are you allowed to homestead in B format? Can you see it, the ABC?
Yeah.
Okay. And my answer is no. You can't do it, because if you did it, you would be precluding or forestalling people from getting into area A, because in the time before tunnels and bridges and helicopters, you would then be controlling A and B, because you would be controlling B because you homesteaded and now you own it, fine. But you'd also be controlling A in the sense that you'd be able to exclude or preclude people from getting into A area. And A area might be a square mile or 10 square miles or whatever it is. So you'd be forestalling or precluding if you did that. And therefore, you may not do that. In the Talmud, we're both Jewish, so the Talmud must mean something to us. My understanding is that if you do that, you have to open up a little pathway so that people can get into A through your own territory. And we say that this is not a positive obligation. Rather, it's that if you don't do it, you're precluding or forestalling. Namely, you're stealing property. You're not allowing people to access the area A. Okay, now let's get back to the baby. Now, when you have a baby, you are not the owner of the baby, because you can't own babies, but you own the right to be the baby's guardian. How do you get the right to be the baby's guardian? Because you and your wife created the baby. And how else do you get to be the baby's guardian? You have to keep feeding it. You have to keep feeding, and if you stop feeding that baby, you are no longer the legitimate guardian of the baby. And if you starve the baby in the back room and you don't tell anybody about it, you are precluding people from grabbing that baby who would like to be the guardian of the baby and adopt the baby. You're not allowing it. So it's not a positive obligation if you go to the orphanage or to the hospital or to the church or whatever. Rather, it's that you won't be guilty of forestalling or precluding. So that would be my answer to this objection. And it's very important, because we libertarians cleave to two things. One, we cleave to the notion that there are no positive obligations. And two, we cleave to the utilitarian notion that any philosophy that says you're allowed to starve your baby is an abomination. And this way we can have our cake and eat it. We can maintain our support for babies, and we can also maintain our opposition to positive obligations. And we just don't interpret it as a positive obligation that you have to notify the orphanage. We do it on the basis that otherwise you're precluding. Now let's take the case of, what was her name? Terry Schiavo. Terry, Schaivo or something like that, or Iavo. Here was a woman who, for all intents and purposes, was a baby. She was an adult woman of 40 years old. I don't want anyone to accuse me of sexism, calling an adult woman a baby, but she was a baby in effect because she was comatose and she couldn't make any decisions for herself. So she needed a guardian. Okay, so the first guy to be a guardian is a husband, fine. So he's no longer her guardian, because the key of a guardian is to keep the guardee or the baby or Terry Schiavo or the comatose person, keep him alive. Keep him alive. That's the key to guardianship. And once he wanted to pull the plug, he's no longer the guardian. So the court made a mistake, because the parents would have been the guardian. The parents said, we don't want to pull the plug, but the goddamn court made a mistake. And even if it was a private court, I would still say the same thing, because they're not acting in accordance with monopolistic libertarian law, which should apply to the whole universe, because libertarian law is the righteous thing. It's the only righteous thing. And we're not going to allow people courts to make those kinds of mistakes, or the mistake that they made with regard to Sati.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a good friend of mine said something which one of my favorite things a friend of mine said, and he said, everyone in the world is a libertarian, at least when it comes to themselves. For themselves wants the freedom to make their own choices.
Yeah.
They just, maybe it's, they don't care about other people making it.
Yeah, look,
Uh,
nobody should murder me, rape me, steal from me, but it's okay if I do that to other people, but only if I vote along with other people. Not if I sort of grab your money or your car, but if I vote to take away your car since you're in the 1% and give it to some poor guy, that's okay. That would be the typical view, and that's the view that we have to overcome.
yeah. I mean, I think the two biggest fallacies that people assume about libertarianism is one, that if you object to it's Frederick Bastiat's, we say that we're against the government doing something, they come to the conclusion that we don't want it being done at all. And the second fallacy is make a distinction between saying it should be legal, that means it's good. I'm not a fan of people snorting cocaine. I agree that this is bad and that it can break up families. Alcohol, can break up families. I'm not encouraging drug use. I'm just saying that the way to combat it is it's not appropriate. I don't think people should call people names, but I think if someone decided to stab someone because they did call someone a name, that would not be an appropriate response.
The same thing with prostitution. You and I think I can speak for you, we don't favor prostitution. I have a daughter. I wouldn't want her to be a prostitute, for God's sakes, but if she stuck to consenting adult behavior, I wouldn't want her to go to jail for it. So you have to make a very fine distinction between favoring something and favoring the legalization of something. And just because you favor the legalization of sex or drugs or pornography or whatever it is, doesn't mean you favor it itself. Libertarianism is distinct from libertinism. In libertinism, you favor these sort of weird sexual behaviors, but we don't have to. We can be libertarians and be conservative in this regard, which brings me to the issue, I don't know if you want to get into this, the difference between thick and thin libertarians. What do you call it? The bleeding heart libertarians. They have their own blog, and I don't know if you want to get off on that, but I'll just say briefly that I'm not a thick libertarian. I'm a very thin libertarian. I think you can hate people. You can do all sorts of nasty things and still be a libertarian and favor nasty things, as long as you cleave seriously to the non-aggression principle, which the court in Terry Schiavo didn't cleave to, and what the Sati case did not cleave to.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. It really annoys me because whenever I defend controversial things, I'm always the legalization of controversial things. I'm always accused of favoring them. Oh, you believe that store owners should be free to not sell to homosexuals? What are you, an idiot? Don't you know that that's what the Nazis did to the Jews? Well, yes, but that was government compulsion. I saying that I'm not a fan of Jim Crow laws, and it's weird that most of the statists just call it Jim Crow. They don't call it Jim Crow laws. They don't want to admit that this is the government, so they just call it Jim Crow. I insist on calling it the three words, Jim Crow laws. I'm not a fan of that. In fact, I would argue that that these laws that the people who say they're against discrimination are in favor of actually protects bigots, because now you don't know who's the bigot or who's not. Where if people were free to discriminate, it's then it's in the clear and you know to avoid them. I mean, really what you're doing is you're saying the punishment for not liking homosexuals is that the homosexual should give this guy money. I mean, that's pretty perverse to me.
Yeah, I mean, these cases where the gay couple goes to the baker or to the florist or the photographer and says, we want you to come to our wedding and, give us your services. And they say, sorry. They have a right. I mean, free association is another way of putting the libertarian non-aggression principle. The only problem with slavery, I hope the New York Times isn't listening, but the only problem with slavery or rape is that it violated the free association law. I mean, the slave didn't want to be associated with the master, and yet he was forced to. The rape victim doesn't want to be associated with the rapist, and yet she is forced to. So this is a free association violation, and yet if Woolworths is forced to serve blacks against their will, they are, to that extent, a much smaller extent, of course, a slave. And Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams have done all sorts of great, wonderful work showing that these, unless it's enforced by government, private bigotry doesn't pay. It's undermined by the market, because if you won't hire a black except at a lower wage, well then you make more profit off of blacks, and people who hire blacks will put you out of business. So Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell are heroes of mine. By the way, they're both warmongers. They both favor U.S. imperialism, and I disagree with them on that. But I still acknowledge that they've made wonderful contributions in the labor economics area or the discrimination area. You know, if you would send me that thing where I said I hate Milton Friedman, I'd like to see it, because I don't believe I said it. Although I trust you, if you say you heard me say it, then but send it to me, because I'd like to see it.
I will send you the link.
I'm sorry?
I will send you the link. It's a debate. It's like a debate, an hour-long debate or so, and I will send you the link.
Okay. You had another question. We're running out of time, so maybe we should get to it. And your other question for me this time was, why do most libertarians, myself included, spend most of their time criticizing people like Milton Friedman and David Friedman and Ronald Coase and James Buchanan and Gordon Tullock and Richard Epstein and, you know, other pretty good people? And why don't we go after, Stiglitz or what's his name that writes for the New York Times? Krugman, or, you know, people like that. And I think that's a very important and interesting question about the sociology of libertarians, and I admit I'm guilty of that. I very, very rarely attacked Krugman or Stiglitz. I think maybe once or twice. Very little attack from me on Keynes, very little on Galbraith. Although maybe one or two articles I've done on those guys, whereas a lot of my critiques have been on Deirdre McCloskey or, I don't know, William Easterly or Coase or people like that, Demsets. And these are pretty good people. So first of all, I agree with you that an awful lot of us do it. Secondly, you mentioned two of Murray's books, For a New Liberty and The Ethics of Liberty. Hayek is another person I've been pretty critical of. And in Murray's The Ethics of Liberty, I think it is, he criticizes 4 or 5 people like this toward the end of the book. And I don't think there are any lefties in there. I don't think he's criticizing Galbraith here, although obviously he criticized Galbraith, but he doesn't spend much time on Galbraith. And one answer is, it's sort of like shooting fish in a barrel. You know, it's not really much fun. I mean, you know, criticize Galbraith or Krugman. I mean, they're just idiots. Stiglitz or, you know, people like that, or Hillary Clinton, you know, they're just evil idiots. And, you know, why spend time on them? It's not as much fun. The second reason, I think, is a thing called product differentiation. Nobody ever in a million years is going to say, well, Hillary Clinton is a libertarian, or Galbraith is a libertarian, or Krugman is a libertarian, or Stiglitz is a libertarian, or Karl Marx is a libertarian. Nobody's going to say that. So we don't have to worry about that. However, people will say Hayek is a libertarian, and even Hayek favored welfare. Or they'll say Milton Friedman is a libertarian, and even Milton Friedman favored the negative income tax or whatever other cockamamie scheme Milton Friedman favored, the school voucher. And then we have to say, yeah, but you know, we're not that kind of libertarian. We don't, just because Hayek favored the welfare system doesn't mean that we favor the welfare system. So,
right. Or Mises supported conscription.
Yes, or Mises supporting conscription, and he did, and he also supported I think subsidies for opera or something like that. I'm not sure about.
Really, that doesn't sound right to me.
I think he did in Human Action in, you know, one sentence. But you know, you have to look. We all make mistakes. According to you, I said I hate Milton Friedman, and I don't hate him. And I've made mistakes. And for example, in The Lighthouse, my first article when I first read The Lighthouse, I only read about 3/4 of it, and then I cited it as a positive thing. And my colleague and friend Bill Barnett said, you should have read the whole thing, because if you read the last quarter of it, you'll see that, you know, he's weak on The Lighthouse. So I've made mistakes. We all make mistakes. You know, I've written, I don't know, 500 refereed articles and maybe 20 books and maybe 3,000 op-eds. It'd be amazing if I didn't make any mistake. I mean, you know, if you put your finger on a typewriter, you're going to make a mistake. The answer is, you know, you apologize for it and move on. I mean, you know, we're all imperfect creatures. We all make mistakes. So I think the second reason is this product differentiation business. It's important to have libertarian purity. Now, this brings me to my my latest brouhaha with Rand Paul. I've come out in favor of supporting Rand Paul, and everyone's saying, Block, if you lost your mind, you know, Rand Paul is not really a good libertarian. He's worse than Milton Friedman or whatever the word is. My answer to that is, this guy never called himself a libertarian. Yes, he called himself a libertarian Republican or a conservative libertarian or constitutionalist libertarian or something, but he never came out and said
he's a libertarian. I think he did before. I think he did earlier, no?
I don't think so. I don't think so. If you think so, send me that link also. And certainly not recently. Maybe when he was 15 years old, he said that under his father's influence. I don't know. But I don't think as an adult, mature person, he said he was a pure libertarian or anything like that, or a Rothbardian. So
that's true.
My argument was, suppose this guy's name was not Rand Paul, but Paul Rand. Had nothing to do with Ron Paul. He was unrelated. And he's taking the positions that he's taking. Well, I think that people like Bob Wenzel and Justin Raimondo, who are two of Rand Paul's biggest critics, would say, wow, this guy's pretty good. I mean, in New Hampshire, he was just fighting all the other Republicans over, you know, how many countries do we want to invade? We now have soldiers in, I don't know, 6 different countries, or we have 6 different wars. And for the neocons, you know, more is better. And he's taking on all the other Republicans. This is a pretty good guy. The problem is that they're comparing him with Murray Rothbard or Ron Paul, and they're saying, well, there's no Murray Rothbard and no Ron Paul. Well, yeah, okay, fine. But compare to who? Compare to Hillary? I mean, Bob Wenzel came out and said that he would vote for Hillary rather than Rand Paul. Compared to the other Republican guys, Cruz and Jeb Bush and Huckabee and all these other people, I mean, he's head and shoulders above them. So here I am. I'm criticizing people who say they're libertarians or are thought to be pure libertarians by many people like Hayek and Friedman and all the others I mentioned, and yet I'm defending Rand Paul. So you might say, well, I'm contradicting myself all over the lot, and yet I don't see it that way. I'm open to be convinced. You know, maybe I'm making a mistake, but I think that my limited support for Rand Paul is compatible with jumping down the throat of Milton Friedman or David Friedman while acknowledging that they did good work, and also not really spending much time on criticizing lefties, because, you know, lefties are just economically illiterate.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with that. I mean, I think, you know, they say you only insult the ones you love. I think you only criticize. To me, if you criticize someone, it means you're intelligent, because I think you're capable of criticism and responding to it intelligently. But if I'm just going to say, you know what, I'm not going to criticize you, you're too dumb. It's like talking to a brick wall, and it's a waste of my breath. So I think it's a form of respect when people criticize me. And I guess I'm one of the most respectful people on the planet, because I criticize everyone. So I even myself, I criticize a lot. You know, sometimes I'll talk to myself and I'll say, Daniel, how can you say what you just said?
Well, that shows you have self-respect.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no one's perfect. I mean, I'm reading. Well, I finished it, but in one of my classes, we were reading Human Action, and for 20 minutes, I criticized Mises, where he basically said Malthus was right, and I said, "What? That's completely idiotic. How can he support, you know, the idea that we should control population? This is just nuts." And for 20 minutes, I wouldn't let it go. I said, you know, I like Mises, but how could he say something so nonsensical?
No, I agree. Malthus was, you know, Malthus is a little weak. I think my favorite, what do you call it, critique of Malthus is over slavery. I don't know why I'm into slavery all the time, but let me do the slavery. I mean, what Malthus was saying is that people are always on the verge of starvation, right? And if we get above starvation levels, you know, we'll have too many people and we'll get right back down to starvation levels. Well, starvation levels mean that you can't produce any more than is necessary to just keep your body and soul together. Well, if that were true, how much would I pay for a slave? supposing slavery to be in existence, and now you are offered as a possible slave, and I'm thinking of capturing you and making you my slave, and then I note that you can't produce much more than the subsistence level. Namely, you can't produce much more than is necessary to keep your body and soul together. Where's the profit in it for me? Why would I want to enslave you if you're that pathetic that you can't produce any more than is necessary to keep yourself alive? Where's the profit for me? I would never spend the money to go capture you. I would never buy you. And if nobody would ever buy any slave, then there couldn't be slavery. And yet there was always slavery. Throughout recorded history, 5,000, 10,000 years ago, whenever we go back in history, Athens, whatever, there was slavery. So that proves that there never could have been this subsistence level. Oh, yes, I don't deny that every once in a while there's a drought or an earthquake or something, and people are put down to subsistence level and lower and die. But over the broad sweep of history, we've always had slavery, and slavery is incompatible with the Malthusian doctrine of subsistence. Therefore, we know that we had slavery. That can't be denied. We don't know that we're at subsistence level, and this proves that we never could have been at subsistence level. So Malthus is totally misbegotten, and all this fear that one day if we have too many machines, we'll get to subsistence level. The whole thing is crazy.
Yeah, or you couldn't even have children because children, are totally reliant on you. So how could you provide for yourself and children?
That's good, right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, of course, he was writing before the Industrial Revolution, which made him even more wrong.
Yeah.
But
well, on the children thing, usually the way subsistence is defined is you just have enough to keep yourself and reproduce enough keeps people to keep yourself going. So I think my slavery example is better than having kids, but I see your point.
All right.
If you interpret subsistence very narrowly, then the kid thing works. But if you interpret the way Malthus did, and most people do, namely you have enough to keep your body and soul together, plus to reproduce your own numbers, then only the slavery works as a refutation.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, I always tell people I'm never going to take political or economic advice from someone who thinks there should be fewer people on the planet. That's sort of my rule. If you say there should be, what you're going to advocate for is not going to be anything which I think is going to be beneficial. So, and live by example. Start with yourself. If you think that.
Words of wisdom. Well, look, we're almost at the end of the hour. I promised you an hour, and it's always fun, and I hope to go on again. Hey, invite Milton Friedman, David Friedman.
I can't invite Milton Friedman. I'm sorry.
You can't invite Milton. I misspoke. David Friedman. By the way, we are going to have a nice debate with Brian Kaplan in August. We're not sure the exact date, but he and I will be debating, Austrian economics. And David could also be a good person on that debate, Austrian economics or libertarian theory. I don't think Brian would be a good debating partner on libertarianism because I think he's an excellent libertarian. But he's not an Austrian, so we could debate that. Or with David, offer him two separate debates, one on Austrianism and the other on libertarianism. See what he says. And even apart from the debates, we usually get together once a month, and now it's April, so hopefully in May, June, July, we'll get together again.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks.
Take care, and thanks for having me on your show again.
I will send you the two links, this and the one where you talked about Friedman.
Can't you get rid of that link?
I didn't make it.
I'm kidding. I do that every once in a while.
What is this, the memory hole?
Right. Put that down the memory hole. I'm ashamed of myself for saying that.
Yeah. All right. No, sure thing. All right. Take care.
Take care.